We have Chief Child Protection Officer at UNICEF Nigeria, Ibrahim Sesay, joining us now on Newsnight. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. In that report, you pointed out the importance of legislation. And I'm wondering, is it that there are no legislation at all, to address female genital mutilation in Nigeria? Or is it that they're not strong enough? Which aspects really need to be, addressed very quickly?
I just want to thank you for inviting me this evening. This is basically a very hot topic when you really look even within the corridors of power in terms of what really needs to be done. In Nigeria, we are not short of laws. Right. When you look in terms of the Child Rights Act, every state in Nigeria, 36, including when in 2003, the Child Rights Act came into force. I'm talking about at the federal level. So the domestication of the Child Rights Act in all states is already there. We have the VAP law, which is basically a very powerful legal tool that we can also use. It's an issue of enforcement. That is where we are lacking. And this is where we really need to make sure those who are already survivors, I would not like to call them as victims, survivors. Right. Because going through the ordeals, like what you've already, depicted as part of the intro, wherein we're talking about 20 million. And in my introduction this afternoon, I also indicated that within the Southern Corridor, before a child reaches 60 days, the court is already done. And you are talking about 90 to 95% of that particular threshold. So which means their rights are even violated even before they start to say, I know what is this all about. So in a sense, we really need to bring all the key stakeholders, starting from the household, because this is where decisions are being made. Right. Mobilizing the household by saying, look, enough is enough. There is no benefit in terms of this, but the health consequences and the issues surrounding it with regards to the growth of our communities, more especially when it even comes in terms of motherhood, is already jeopardized before even the child grows as a woman.
I'm happy you're talking about this, Ibrahim Sesay. When you spoke about laws, you have to come back to the homes. Harmful practices. We've seen people as educated as you are, as all of us here, they say, well, this is our culture. I went through this, you must also go through this. And I know, I see the smile on your face because you've seen that. Across our continent, we've seen that, whether in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Nigeria. How much of, a kind of education or sensitization are we putting in place to ensure that we can re-educate and change some of those perspectives or perception? Which they thought is cultural.
When you look in terms of our culture, it really leads to our heritage. And then curbing shorter practice, more especially when it is embedded within the fabrics of society. This is not anything you can just do overnight. You really need to galvanize society. So this is basically, it's a whole of society approach. This is a whole of community approach. You could have the political will, but obviously, those who really make the decisions within those households, and then of which they culminate within those communities to say, this is a norm that is basically part of our social fabric, and which of course is very, very difficult just to disentangle. So what does this require us to do? For instance, in Nigeria, UNICEF and UNFPA, we've been able to come together in 5 states. We now have over 6 million people. This is basically the surveillance teams that should be there in terms of reporting. But then if you have also a very weak system at the top, then it's becoming counterproductive. And that's why we're really building a very strong system. When you talk about prosecution, you look in terms of the police force, you look in terms of, in fact, the key issue that came today, and which of course it's really is mind-boggling, is the medicalization of FGM. Now, people within local communities, they are saying we are really pushing back no more FGM within our own communities. But the medicals are even saying, come, bring them. And this is where you find out that there has been a shift with regards to some of the predictable outcomes that you say, let it really be. So just not the engagements of communities, even those that are educated, that are even within the medical field. We now look in terms of the medicalization of FGM.
Wow.
So this is where you see we have to really come together as a community to say, yes, enough is enough. I give you one example. We thought initially that this is, basically within a generation you'll be able to get this done. Like for instance, you look at foot binding in China when it came into practice. And people were saying, if your feet are bent, then obviously there is no marriageability regarding those particular persons. And then that was some of the key things. But here, it is basically part of our culture, part of our system, and it runs right across within West Africa. So which at this particular point in time, not just the enforcement of laws, but we really need to really mobilize all the key stakeholders, traditional rulers, religious leaders, opinion. And one thing that is also very much important is how do we really galvanize and then tap in onto the agency, more especially of even adolescent girls. And if you look at trends, which is quite unique, the age of courting starts to diminish as soon as, they are moving from their early teens to their late teens. So it is more within the lower ages where we quite see
making them vulnerable.
Yes. So because they are more vulnerable, and then decisions can be taken, and then you don't really see why they should really be part of a norm in society.
That makes it even more complicated when it's done, they're exposed that young. There's a talk about encouraging women and young girls to speak out. How do you begin to do that? How do you give them that confidence to speak out? What really should they be saying?
When you really see somebody who is a survivor coming out in the open and declaring, say, look, I've gone through this, and these are some of the consequences that I'm really experiencing. Issues like fistula, for instance.
Right.
Now, they may see that individual passing by, and then they think, oh, everything is normal. Like we had 2 testimonies today. They are saying, bring in adolescent girls, form them into groups, tap into the knowledge and skills, the vibrancy that they have. I give you an example. Like for instance, in 5 states, both in Southeast and then in the Southwest, we have over 50, 60 organizations. These are led by young people. And they are trying to really make sure, as a part of a movement to end FGM, to say, let's come together, let's share our own experiences, the skills and knowledge that we have in terms of prevention. How can we make sure we form a sort of a resistance group, even within our own small communities? It's not an easy, stride to really take. But this is really proving very effective, because now the adolescents are saying, we would not really want to take such a pathway wherein our mothers have been through.
Very quickly before we let you go, okay, we're done. We have to leave it there. I was going to ask, what strategy, for government, and the governments at different levels, that they can come in 30 seconds. Can you address that?
Oh yeah. Well, the important thing here, more especially when you look with regards to the issues surrounding government, like one of the high points today, wherein we had Her Excellency Senator Olaremi Tinubu came out clearly with a declaration to say, if government's efforts were this low, this is the moment wherein we are really moving the ladder up and setting up a stage for things to really be. And so this is where you really see, in the eyes of public opinion, in the eyes of galvanizing other stakeholders, not just at the federal level, but she mentioned, say, look, I will really work with all of the first ladies in each state.
Fantastic. It's a good place to leave it. Ibrahim Sesay, Chief Child Protection, UNICEF Nigeria, thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight.
A pleasure.